This is the Blairing Out with Eric Blair show today, coming to you from Alex's Bar in Long Beach, California, with the man, the myth, the legend, Sex Pistols bassist, songwriter, and solo artist, Glen Matlock. Well, how you doing today, Glen?
Not bad, Eric. How are you? Am I a myth? Am I a myth?
No, you exist.
Yeah.
But we can always do a voiceover later.
Okay.
We just want it to be exciting for you.
Yeah, all right. You certainly achieved that.
Yeah.
See, I've kind of come alive already.
Yeah. What have been some of the highlights of the tour so far?
Well, it's not. This isn't really a tour. It's 3 selected dates. I was in New York. That was pretty good. I played a place called Joe's Pub, which sounds like a pub. It's actually this really cool arts centre at the top of the Bowery on Astor Place. So that was kind of fun. And I had some of my chums come down from New York. I was there for about a week. Then I played the night before last in LA proper. That was kind of cool, but I'm looking forward to this place. I like this. They got some fantastic paintings around. Yeah. The blue lady. I wonder if that's the original Blue Lady.
What were the pros and cons of your youth?
Just being in the kind of right place at the right time, being in at the instigation of the whole punk rock thing in England, although it wasn't really called punk rock then. It was just meeting Steve and Paul and later on John and McLaren. I would have either liked to have been a lot younger now, because I would be younger now, probably be about your age now, or older, because I kind of just missed swing in London. I was 10 years old in 1966 when the whole pirate radio and the King's Road thing was going on. So I feel I've been catching up a little bit, but we kind of carved our own niche.
How did your time at St. Martin's School of Art shape you as a person?
It was great because it was right in the middle of Soho. Soho's like the sort of happening place in the middle of London, and there was a kind of a spin-off from what had been going on in the 50s and the 60s, and the pubs used to shut in the afternoons. So there was all these sort of illicit, illegal, under-the-counter drinking establishments where you would see walking down the street going in people like Lucian Freud and Francis Bacon, and just round the corner from the art college. That was more interesting than the actual art college itself, but it was my stepping stone to that. And I only went to art college because every band that I'd liked had been to art college in the 60s, so I went trying to get in a band, but as things turned out, I got in a band outside of that and introduced those guys to the art college scene, because there was like discos and people were more up for a laugh, you know, and looking for something new. They were more open-minded, left field people. So that was cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, Brian Ferry, a lot of people went to art school back in England.
Practically everybody I can think of. Ian McLaren, I think Charlie Watts, Ray Davis. People used to go because it was, I didn't really want to get a job. Yeah. They didn't quite know what they wanted to do. You used to get a grant from the government to go, so it brought you a little bit of breathing space to think and meet some like-minded people.
How did you end up working for Malcolm McLaren and Vivienne Westwood's boutique Sex?
When I started working for Malcolm, it was a teddy boy shop. You know what teddy boys are? Mm-hmm. You know, like Kim Fowley in American Graffiti with long draped coats, and then it became the shop called Sex, which I actually helped. If you see any pictures of Sex, I actually helped make the sign for it, which was supposed to be a bit like a pink Rauschenberg sculpture, but we ran out of foam padding. So it didn't quite come out how it was supposed to. There was lots of things like that going on. Vivienne Westwood made these great T-shirts. They were like kind of bikers T-shirts with cap sleeves, and made slogans on them like pervert or rocker or something like that, out of chicken bones. But she always used to say, well, if you're going over the road to the chicken and chips place, can you keep the box with the bones? Because she kept the bones to make the T-shirts out of. There was a lot of kind of do-it-yourself going on.
Were you present at John Lydon's Sex Pistols audition singing Alice Cooper's I'm 18?
Yes, I was. It was already the Sex Pistols before John joined, although we didn't have the singing, we hadn't done any gigs. We'd just become the Sex Pistols.
At the time, did you bond with any of the other Sex patrons, such as Chrissie Hynde, Adam Ant, Susie Sue, Sue Catwoman, or Billy Idol, also known as the Bromley Contingent?
Yeah, they were people who came in the shop and they would come and support us when we did our first shows, really. You know, they were the kind of 15 of the 20 people that come to see our first gigs. And to a man and girl, they all went on to do something of some kind of consequence. It was kind of good. I think what I'm most proud of, as well as getting the Pistols together, is being part of this kind of scene, which was like dropping a stone in a pond, and the ripples are still rippling backwards and forwards this day. It was kind of happening time looking back, but you don't always see that when you're in the middle of it.
Did Chrissie Hynde ever approach you to be in a band? Because she was trying to put together a lot of bands at the time.
I remember we had our own rehearsal place. Steve Jones played drums, I played bass. Mick Jones played guitar while he was checking out Chrissie to be a singer, not for the Clash, but for A Project. This is before the Clash. And we did a song which was a bit like the Kinks, Sitting on Your Sofa. Boom, boom, doo, 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 doo. And she sang, "Get on your hind legs, baby." So yeah, we go back a long while. And I remember actually going with her, because she was living in London, and I don't think she had her paperwork sorted out, so she wanted to get a job. And we went to this sex shop, not the sex shop, but it was a shop that sold accoutrements called Ann Summers. And she went in to try and get a job. Then I waited outside for her to come out. She didn't get the job. So yes, I go back a long way with lots of those kind of people. And one of the guys I'm biggest mates with, who's a behind-the-scenes guy, and he actually booked the first Sex Pistols show at Central School of Art, although it was the first one to book it, but we actually played one before then, which I organised. And this guy was a guy called Al McDowell, and he lives here now. He lives in Silver Lake. And, funny thing, when we was doing a Pistols thing over in '96, we did a photo session, and I was running late to go and meet my friend in a photo session. I said to the guy, "Right, I'm late now. Can you tell me the quickest way to Silver Lake?" And the cameraman said, "Yeah, you got to go to art school." Now it was really funny because I was going to go and meet this guy from art school. Al, who lives there, became a film behind the scenes guy, and he was in London recently, maybe a year ago. Called me up. I said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "Well, I'm at Pinewood Studios." I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Art directing Star Wars 9. And he's the guy who booked the first Sex Pistols show. So there's all kind of people, that kind of coterie.
Adamant.
He was around. Again, he was an art school boy. He went to another art college called Hornsey College of Art, which was in North London. But our first gig, we supported them. But it turned into a fracas because John heard his vocals for the first time. Don't think he was that impressed with it, and he started kicking the PA around, and they didn't like that because I found out recently that their PA was on hire purchase, on instalments, and they hadn't paid for it yet, so they was worried it was going to be repossessed. So it's sort of lads.
That's rock and roll.
It's rock and roll, yeah.
If the Sex Pistols existed before John Lydon,
only just, yeah, but we did.
For how long?
I don't know, about 2 months. Steve and Paul had a band, and they used to come in the shop, and I overheard, and for some reason they was trying to get Malcolm McLaren involved, and I was working there. I overheard, and Malcolm kind of humoured them out. How's the band going, lads? And Paul said, "Oh, I don't know, we're trying to take it seriously. The bass player never turns up," and the bass player was Paul's sister's fiance, Del. And I said, "Well, I play bass," and they went, "You do?" And I said, "Yeah." "What's your favourite band?" "The Faces." "Really? That's our favourite band too." Next thing, I'm playing with them. And they sort of had a band. They didn't really have much idea, but they had a certain spirit, Steve particularly. And we started working on stuff. And what we started working on was doing covers of songs, but sometimes they're a bit hard to learn all the chord changes. And we weren't that kind of dedicated to getting it spot on. And it started sounding not like what you were trying to play, but something else. And before you know it, you got a new song. Yeah. So we kind of rolled with that. And we had a few things. And then Steve was originally the singer, but never going to cut it as a singer. Moved to the guitar, got good on the guitar, and we was on the lookout for a singer. And out of the people who come in the shop, and Mr. Rotten was one of them.
How important was Malcolm to that?
Malcolm he didn't put us together. We sort of put ourselves together under his auspices, because I used to work for him. I used to measure teddy boys up for their suits, take the measurements, and then have to call them through to this Jewish tailor, Mr. Green, in the East End of London, dial all the measurements through. But Malcolm's address book, it wasn't alphabetical order because that was too easy. It was just like a list of names, and you'd have to flick through the pages of his address book to get Mr. Green's number, and he'd have like the editor of the NME's number, he'd have Yoko Ono's number, the IRA for some reason, IT, which was International Times, which was some hippie alternative thing. He was an interesting bloke, you know, and it's through by doing that we thought, you know, 10 years older than us, kind of in tune with things. Everybody was in the right place at the right time. Just not maybe through thinking it through, but through a gut kind of feeling.
How would you describe the early Sex Pistols rehearsals?
A noisy confabulation of us all trying to outdo each other by turning up to number 10, you know. It was like any band starting out, really. But the difference was we all had short hair and tight trousers, or, you know, drainpipe trousers, when everybody had flares and greatcoats and long hair. That was the main point. And also we was hip to what was beginning to go on in New York. Malcolm had been backwards and forwards to America. He dabbled with managing the tail end of the New York Dolls. He sort of met Sylvain at a used clothing fair. In fact, I'm mates with Sylvain, and I said, how did you meet Malcolm? And he said, well, I met him at this used clothing sort of fair, you know, like in a hotel on the outskirts of New York somewhere. I said, well, what was you doing there? He said, well, I had a faded blue denim shop. I said, did you? And he said, yeah. He said, not only that, I sold a pair of dungarees to Janis Joplin. All these people were having a go at things, and sometimes things kind of stick, you know. So Malcolm brought back some pictures of these bands. None of the bands had made records at that stage, but we kind of knew that there was something else kind of going on, which we were hip to.
How did the songwriting process work during the Sex Pistols' infancy?
In its infancy, which is where most of the songs came through, I would bring an idea in, we'd jam it out, and John would have a plastic bag full of lyrics, and we'd start singing something over the top. But because we were so loud and we didn't have a very good PA, we never really heard what he was singing too much. And then occasionally me and John sat down and wrote something together. Occasionally I wrote something, say, here's the words, you know, have a go at singing that. Occasionally Steve would bring something in. But what was interesting was John never ever once said, I've got these words, have you got any music for it? And when we came up with Anarchy in the UK, which is like my kind of chord changes and stuff, John said, at last, you've got something for this set of lyrics I've got. But he never said, can you find something for this set of lyrics? I mean, maybe it's just as well. Perhaps it wouldn't have come out like that, but kind of odd. But I think everybody was, you know, young, didn't quite know their relationship with each other. And perhaps he was a bit shy at that stage. He wasn't a singer. I don't think he'd had any plans to be a singer whatsoever until we asked him to be one. So he was kind of in at the deep end somehow.
When did you see his classic John Lydon, Johnny Rotten personality blossom?
I think once he started getting his face in the newspapers, it sort of, he kind of took the ball and run with it.
How much of that do you think is tongue-in-cheek, and how much is that really John?
I don't think even he knows.
Did you see the footage from the punk movie, the get-together where he...
With Marky Ramone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Well, John reminded me of somebody, and there's an Australian comedian called Barry Humphries who does a character called Sir Les Patterson. Check it out.
What do you think of the perceived war between the Sex Pistols and the Ramones?
Well, there wasn't a war. We went to check them out the first time they played in London, and we was kind of quite surprised at how much on the same page they were without, you know, we hadn't heard them until that, and they hadn't heard us. We were pretty much going at the same time. I think what happened was, it was, you know, we got fed up with all the progressive rock bands, and, you know, Yes and Genesis, and that bloke, the piano player, is actually quite good. Rick Wakeman, you know, he did the 16 Wives of Henry VIII and all that on ice at Wembley. Didn't mean nothing to us, you know. And then over here you had the Allman Brothers and Jessica and it didn't mean anything to those guys in New York. So I think everybody got fed up with the same things that weren't speaking for them at the same time, both sides of the Atlantic. And then also there's another thing as well that people always forget about: airlines. Freddie Laker, right? You're too young for this, but he set up his own airline, Laker Airways, undercutting everybody, and you could fly it to New York, I think at one stage for about £25. Now this is like at the end of the 70s, but that enabled people, it was like a transatlantic bridge, you know, so people would come to London. And at one stage I remember going to New York, well the first time I went I was playing with Iggy Pop, and that was a proper, you know, experience. But then I went back to do some other things, and you could go to New York and it was full of people from London. If you went back to London it was full of people from New York, because the airlines, you know, they was doing these standby fares. People forget that, but it's all these little things contribute.
Was Malcolm present during the practices?
No, he wasn't there.
Okay.
Although once he was there and we had an idea for a song, I forget which one it was, and he said, I think John wasn't there that day, and we had a little rehearsal place downstairs with a room where me and Steve shared upstairs, which was our kind of hangout, bedroom, office. And while we was downstairs, Malcolm said he'd have a go at writing some words. And when we sort of exhausted ourselves from playing full tilt for half an hour, went upstairs for a cup of tea, I said, how's it going, Malcolm? And I looked around the room and there's all screwed up bits of paper all over the floor, and he went, oh, it's hard, isn't it? That was his only contribution to writing songs. But he did always encourage us to write our own songs.
Can you give an account of the interworkings of your interpersonal relationships with Steve Jones, Paul Cook, and John Lydon at that time?
It was kind of a workman-like one. There wasn't really four people in the band. It was like a triumvirate. It was like Steve and Paul were a bit of a double act. They were kind of like, to me, they were, and I say this because I really like them, they were like the Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble of punk. Steve being Fred, right? So it was those two together, John and me, and there was quite a good sort of balance with it. Steve and Paul had the sound, I had the tunes mainly, and John had the words, and it all kind of worked. So that was quite good. But as I say, as soon as we started getting in the newspapers and things, those relationships changed.
What was the mood in the studio during the recording of the Anarchy in the UK single and B-side, I Want to Be Me? Was it Chris Thomas, Bill Price, or Dave Goodman?
We started doing it with Dave Goodman, who was our sound guy, and we'd done all our demos with him, which got us the recording deal, and we thought we'd give him a shot. But the thing with Dave was he was sort of a bit beholden to Malcolm, who was in the studio. And Malcolm was saying, oh, it's not exciting enough, and we was playing it over and over and over, and we got fed up with it, and it was ended up sounding worse, not better. And so we kind of went on strike, and we said, this is not working out with Dave. It's not really Dave's fault, but we need somebody else. And Paul came up with a few suggestions for producers, one being Bill Nelson from Bebop Deluxe. I didn't even really know what a producer was supposed to do back then. And the other one was Chris Thomas, who'd done all the early Roxy Music stuff. So, and we already knew, we'd been in the studio with Chris Spedding. Chris Spedding was like the go-to session guitarist in London at the time. He was one of the few guys with like a rockabilly haircut and used to come in Malcolm's shop. I think he'd already told Chris Thomas about us and he'd seen us, so he was interested. We'd signed a reasonable sized deal. So we went in the studio with Thomas. John didn't come down initially, and we recorded the track. 5 goes. I think it's like the first half from the third take, and the second half from the 5th one, spliced together. We're sitting around waiting for John. So we called him up, where are you? And he said, well, you lot can't play, you know, you have to keep doing it over and over. You can't have done it. And he said, well, we have. And it was because we said to Chris Thomas, we don't want Malcolm in the studio. And Chris Thomas knew when it sounded right. So it was as simple as that.
What are your memories of the Sex Pistols' first gig at the Nashville pub in London's West Kensington, where you supported the 101ers, fronted by the legendary Joe Strummer?
Yeah, Joe Strummer. Well, I knew Joe already, the 101ers. I kind of met Mick Jones at one of his gigs. And I used to hang out with him a little bit. I remember going to see them a couple of days before. They was playing at a place called the Acklam Hall, and I took Steve with me. We went in the dressing room before they was going on, and he had, you know, he was trying to tune up his guitar, and he had those pitch pipes, and he was blowing them, and And me and Steve snuck up behind him and we're going like, to put him off for a laugh. And he turned around and went, oh, right, Sex Pistols, eh? We'll see tomorrow night at the National, or 2 nights later. And he saw us, and that night he broke the 101ers up. And then around then he met Mick Jones and started forming the Clash. But I knew Bernard Rhodes, who managed the Clash, who used to hang out with us and Malcolm. And I said, who have you got? He said, we found a singer. I said, who you got? And he said, Joe Strummer. And I said, he's a bit older than he. Because he was a couple of years older than everybody. And when you're young, that makes a lot of difference. He said, I'll have 10 years off of him. And he did. So it's kind of fun stuff going on. But the first gig at the Nashville, the only thing I really remember about it, and if I remember this right, we wanted to make a splash, and there was curtains around the stage, so nobody ever used them, but you could open the curtains, or close the curtains. So we decided we was going to do this, and there was a control switch at the sound desk at the back. And the idea was Paul was going to do bump, bump, bump on the drums when we was ready, and Malcolm would press the button and the curtains open. Well, the dressing room, there was no restroom there, right? So we go on and Steve says, I needed a pee, and the curtain's shut. So he starts having a pee, and then Paul's just fiddling with his drums and the curtain. There's always things like that going on, and then we started to get a reputation for it. We played there another time, and a fight broke out in the audience. Now, when you're in a band and you started out and there's not that many people there, there's 2 things. Like a girl takes her top off, nobody watches the band because they all watch her. Or there's a fight, nobody watches the band because there's a fight. So we're trying to break it up. And this guy, Joe Stevens, took a photograph, and it looks like we're fighting with the audience, and it was the front page of the Melody Maker next week. They even attacked their fans. Well, we thought it was funny, but we was actually trying to break the fight up because nobody would watch us. All stuff like that all the time.
Is it true that Malcolm and John Lydon helped to fuel your exit from the Sex Pistols?
Probably, but my exit, it was my decision at that time. Whether it was the right thing to do or not, I don't know. John really changed when he got his face in the paper. Malcolm sort of seemed to want to pitch it as like a sort of punk rock version of the Archies, like he'd done it all, which wasn't true. When I was in the band, it was like the early Who, it was a band by the kids for the kids, and it started to not be very honest. We wasn't allowed to play anywhere, and I'd go out and some promoter would come and say, hey Glenn, tell Malcolm I'll put you on. So I'd go and tell Malcolm, and he'd go, no, we're not allowed to play. And this happened quite a lot, and I was like, and there was lots of arguments. And there's something went on with a record company, which is a long story I'm not going to go into, but I thought there's a good expression in life, more trouble than it's worth. So I walked.
And you weren't frightened at all about your future at that point?
Well, no, because the guy at EMI, this is before we got sacked from EMI, said to me, and in fact, he's still a friend. I was staying with him in New York before I came here. He became a record producer. He produced Soft Cell Tainted Love by Soft Cell. But he was the A&R guy at the time, and he said, look, we know there's a problem with you and the band, and as a record company, we hope you sort it out. He said, but if you don't sort it out, we see you as the main tunesmith in the band, and we'd be more than interested in anything you come up with. Now, I wasn't rushing to sign to EMI at all, but I thought if they think that, every other record company will do. And I started putting a few feelers out. Then I found out they was rehearsing with Sid without saying anything to me, which I felt stupid about and wasn't happy about. And then we had a big meeting. I said, well, look, I know you're doing this. You're going behind me back. If you don't want me to do it, say so. But they said, well, we do. I said, well, why are you rehearsing with Sid? Also knowing full well what the record company guy said. And then Paul's going, well, can't you just pretend you like John? I said, well, like you two guys do and never say boo to him. And they went, and I said, no, I'm coming up most of the tunes. Either back me up and then we can continue. And like Malcolm's going, and that was it. So I left. And then 2 weeks later he came back to me and he said, I've made a mistake, come and do it. But meanwhile he'd sent a telegram to the NME saying that I'd been sacked for liking the Beatles. And I said, Malcolm, how can you do that and then ask me to... I said, fuck off. So that was it. And I started getting my band of Retrogrades together that did all right in England for a bit.
How'd you find Midge Ure?
Before we got John in the band, Bernard Rhodes and Malcolm McLaren went on a mad trip to buy old clothes around England and ended up in Glasgow. And they also had some equipment that Steve Jones had got that wasn't kind of advisable to try and sell in London. And they went in a music shop when everybody's got flares and long hair and great coats and kipper ties and rubbish. And these two Jewish blokes from London who were dressed a bit weird went in there tried to sell an amplifier. And there was one other guy in there who happened to have a quiff. And it was Midge. And he went out, he heard what was going on and went out, and being a canny Scotsman, he bought it cheap off of them. And they got his number. And he came back to London, and Malcolm gave him his number, and I called up and spoke to his mum. And I said, well, you know, you don't know me, you know, is Midge there? And she went, oh, Midge, there's somebody from London speaking to you. And he spoke. And I explained that we're getting this band together and that Malcolm and Bernard had met him and liked his look. And he said, well, actually, I've got this band called Slick, and it looks like it's going to take off. And it did. They had a couple of big pop hits. They had a #1 record. Boom. So a couple of years had gone by, and I tried out every would-be singer in London. Couldn't find anybody. I had a record deal sitting there and all that. And I just went in a record store and I was flicking through the racks and I found this Slick record. And they'd been and gone by then. And I thought, I wonder what he's doing. So I made a few inquiries, got somebody to call him up. Then he came down and we rehearsed, got on well, joined the band. Sure. I knew full well, this is like the height of punk, the Midge is a pop singer. It would put the cat amongst the pigeons with the punks. Now I didn't really want to wind them up, but I didn't want to be a second division Sex Pistols. I wanted to do something different. Midge has got a really good voice, you know.
How did Steve New get along with former David Bowie guitarist Mick Ronson when he was producing the Rich Kids album Ghost of Princes in Towers?
Right, how did he get on with it? Got on with him great. Mick took him under his wing. Mick Ronson even gave him his Ziggy Stardust outfit, you know, with the knickerbocker trousers and the socks and the sort of glittery big lapel thing. Steve had that for Mick. It was good. He saw him. Steve was a fantastic guitarist. And Mick encouraged that.
What was it like for you to work with Mick Ronson?
He was great. He was a superlative musician. He was a laugh. He was sort of on the same wavelength. I remember being in the studio. We was trying to do some vocals, and we had an idea for doing a harmony. And he said, well, what we'll do, we'll just we'll slow the tape down. I said, well, if you slow the tape down, you know, to make the vocals higher, it'll be out of tune. When we play it back, he said, oh, no. He said, A is 440, so if you double the speed, that's 880. So if we wanted to be a fifth above that, so that'll be 725. And it was like that. It was like somebody doing the scores in darts or something. And it was like all this kind of technical musical stuff that I never knew. And he just knew it like that. And he looked great. And then also I remember doing something. I came in one day and there was something on the track. I said, what's that? He said, well, I put a bit of guitar on it. I went, that's not very good, is it? He said, no, you're right, it's shit. We took it off. You know, he didn't mind. It was just all having a go. He
was a genius. I mean, he helped produce that Lou Reed album, Transformer.
He gave the album its name. They was in the studio one day, and Lou, they was going to break for lunch, and Lou and Bowie went off to have some lunch, and Mick stayed behind to finish off a bit of guitar or something. You might know this story. While he was there, one of Lou Reed's friends came in who looked a bit like New York in 1974 or wherever it was. And Mick was busy, and he said, can I leave a message? And he went, yeah, all right. And then Ronson forgot. And then Lou and David came back from lunch. And I said, how's it going? Anybody drop by? And Ronson said, yeah. He said, one of your friends come by. He said, what was his name? I said, I was busy, I can't really remember. But what did he look like? Well, he was one of those kind of not transvestite looking, he said Transformers looking, because he's from North England, got it wrong. No, but that's what they called the album, Transformer.
You were very fortunate to work with him also.
Yeah, you don't get what you don't ask for. And I met him because he called up the office one day and he knew one of the guys who was involved with our management. He said, "Is Peter there?" And I said, "He's not there." And this bloke had his voice like this on the telephone. And I said, "Well, can I take a message? Who's that?" He said, "Well, tell him Michael called." And I said, "That's not Mick Ronson, is it?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, and he said, "Where are you?" And I said, "I'm Glen." And he went, "You're not Glen Matlock, are you?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "How do you know me?" And he said, "Well, Peter told me." I said, "Well, we're looking for a producer and we're rehearsing tomorrow. You want to come down?" And he went, "All right then." I said, "Bring your guitar." And he did. And as soon as we got there, we knocked through about 2 songs and went to the pub and got on great. And his family, I'm like lifelong friends with his family.
What led to the dissolution of the Rich Kids?
Steve Strange. Do you know a guy called Steve Strange?
He formed Visage.
He was a friend of mine, but Midge and Rusty, they did it as a side project thing. It kind of took off. And then sort of Midge and Rusty wanted to become all electronic with the Rich Kids. No, nothing against the electronic music. I kind of dug Can and Kraftwerk and people like that. And it was kind of a little bit old to me, and they'd only just discovered it. And they wanted the band to go in that direction. And I wanted to be in a rock and roll band, so it just wasn't going to work, you know. So that was that. So I kind of knocked the band on the head, thought they went and did their thing, good luck to them. They was kind of right in a way, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. And I was sitting at home thinking, well, what am I going to do now? Wouldn't it be great if the phone rang? And it rang. And this guy said, "Is Glen Matlock there?" And I said, "Yeah, who are you?" And he said, "Well, my name's Peter Davis. You won't know me, but I manage Iggy Pop, and we're here in London, and Jim would like a word with you." And I said, "Oh, hi." He said, "Well, we're in town, you know. Do you fancy a drink?" And I said, "Who's buying?" He said, "We are." So I went and met him at this Flash Hotel. The next thing, I'm playing with Iggy Pop.
But before that, and we're going to get back to the Iggy Pop thing, because that's amazing, you were approached by Sid Vicious. What was Sid Vicious's mental and emotional state during the rehearsals and live shows with the punk rock supergroup Vicious White Kids?
All right. Well, hang on, this punk rock supergroup.
I know, you guys hate that term.
Well, yeah, but we did one gig, right? Sid used to live around the corner from me in a place called Maidavale in London, and we were sitting in the pub together, you know, after the American tour that fell apart. The Pistols had broken up by then. I was sort of sitting there thinking, well, if that's what you want, that's what's going to happen. It did. But I got on with Sid, and he was going like, well, it's kind of weird, and everybody thinks we're enemies, and we're sitting there and having a drink. And I said, yep. He said, how can we prove it to people? And I said, well, do we need to prove it to people? He said, well, no, not really. I said, I'll tell you what, we could do a gig for a laugh. And he went, oh, yeah. He said, who can we get? I said, well, how about getting Steve from the Rich Kids? And how about Rat Scabies? Now, Rat wasn't in the Damned because he'd fallen out with them at that stage, and he had another band called the White Cats. So that was it. Sid Vicious, me and Steve from the Rich Kids, and Rat Scabies from the White Cats, the Vicious White Kids. And we did one gig for a laugh, and that was it.
What did you think of Nancy Spungen?
Not a lot. When we was doing the sound check, she sort of insisted on getting on the stage without asking. So I went up to the guy in the sound desk, Henry, who still works with Iggy, and had been the Rich Kids kind of guy. And I went, he said, don't worry, our mic's turned off, before I could say a word. So everybody thought the same thing.
Do you think that if she hadn't been in Sid's life, that Sid's life would have taken a different direction?
Yeah, totally. She poor girl, she was bad news.
What kind of adventure did you have collaborating with Iggy Pop on his Soldier album?
I don't know, it was an adventure. It was just making another record with somebody else who was interesting. He was looking for some songs. I had a few ideas which were going to go towards the Rich's second album, which we never made. Had a couple of other ideas that we all put in the pot, and he needed ideas because he was under not duress, but some kind of pressure from the record company, you know, and you've got to find ideas from somewhere. So we just all worked on it together, really. And Steve was involved, and different people popped down, and Ivan Crowell kind of got in on it because Iggy had asked him down. Bowie popped in a little bit.
How How did you interact with David Bowie while recording the Soldier album?
Well, he wasn't there all the time when we was recording it. But what he did do, we didn't finish mixing it. We went off and did a tour of America, and then he helped do some of the mixes in New York. And I was quite pleased. I wasn't there when the mix. When I came back, though, he actually mixed a track called Loco Mosquito, which, and there's one bit where I do a bass run and he pushes it right up, and I was like, oh, but he's not credited because of contractual obligation.
Well, now, okay, so is it true that Steve New punched David Bowie for hitting on his girlfriend, Patty Paladin, and so Dave, the legend goes that he mixed Steve New's lead guitar out of the mix?
Well, Iggy kind of mixed it out, not Bowie, because he only worked on that one track. But yes, he did. But Steve thought he was hitting on Patty, and he kind of was, but the place was in the middle of nowhere, and he was only hitting on her because they'd run out of cigarettes, and he thought that she had a packet of cigarettes stashed in her room. It's kind of stupid. Patty told me that recently. I'm still friends with Patty. So, yeah, rock and roll nonsense.
From what I understand is Steve New had some addiction problems. Sometimes those can cloud the way you perceive reality.
Yeah, but I think when you see David Bowie kind of leaning nonchalantly in your girlfriend's bedroom door, you probably turn two together and come up with five anyway, you know.
Were you present for the James Williamson debacle?
Yeah, he was. Well, no, actually, he'd left because I went back I'd done the rhythm tracks and I'd gone back to London, and all this stuff had happened with his punch-up when he was there, and James had split, and he not only walked out of the studio, he walked out of the music business for 30 years and never picked up a guitar again until he got the call to play with the Stooges. It was funny, but that's a long story, that. But I got on well with James. We used to go to my local curry shop and get righteously drunk.
What did you learn from the time that you were around David Bowie?
Nothing in particular, really, but must have picked something up. I do remember he came to see us play at Hurrah, which is a club uptown in New York. And then we all went down to the Mud Club in his car, and he had the same car and driver as from the man who fell to earth. And we all squeezed in the back of his car, and I'm actually sitting on David Bowie's knee because there was no room. And in the back of the car, there's supposed to be mirrors, you know, the big sedan. But not in his car. He had a miniature painting on one side and a miniature painting on the other. And I went, hang on a second, that's a Picasso, isn't it? And he went, yeah, and he was surprised that I knew what a Picasso was. I went, that's a Cézanne or something like that. And he was surprised that I got it right. And being drunk, and we was all drunk, I said, well, you're a flash cunt, aren't you? And he went, guess I am.
Highlights of touring with Iggy Pop during the Soldier period?
I think one of the best gigs I've ever did. We played at the Palladium in New York it was the first time I've ever been to New York. It was like the second show we did in America. We headlined the Palladium in New York. It was ram-packed. It was Halloween. The whole audience was in fancy dress. And in England, we never really celebrated Halloween back there. The Cramps supported us. And backstage was Debbie Harry, dressed as a witch, who gave me a kiss on the cheek. That was pretty good. And I was about 23.
Soldier's one of my favorite records because of your bass tone, because it is so prominent in the mix.
Well spotted.
Yeah.
I haven't listened to it for a long time, actually, but perhaps I should do. But there's some great songs in it. I think the lyrics are great. Take Care of Me, I wrote the tune for that. Iggy wrote the words. I need somebody to pull me up because I'm sinking like crazy in my sauerkraut. You know, if you know the backstory to that, I'm not going to go into it, but there's some good stuff going on there. Dog Food.
Knocking Them Down in the City, Jane's Addiction ripped off their entire sound from that song. Was it a little surreal playing bass in the Faces reunion with Ron Wood, Kenny Jones, Ian McLagan, and Simply Red's Mick Hucknall?
No, it felt about right, actually. It was a dream come true. Ian McLagan plays on a track on the Rich Kids album. Mm-hmm. He did a tour with us. I got ready mated with him, lost contact. He was doing a radio show in England. I knew the people at the radio station. I called up and said, here, give Mac my number. Then he called me up when the show was finished. What you doing? Because he'd moved to Austin, Texas by then. We met up for a drink. I said, what you been doing? He said, I've been doing did something with Dylan, and Bruce Springsteen's always called me up. I said, what do you really want to do? He said, I want to reform the Faces. And Ronnie Lane had passed away by then. And I said, well, look, I know that you know that I know that you know that I'm the right guy for the job, so put a word in for me. And he did, and that was it. And I was trying to get Rod to do it, and he was going to do it, and then he weren't, so he didn't do it in the end. So it would have been great to do it with Rod Stewart. But Mick Hucknall stepped forward and did it. Mick Hucknall's a great soul singer, and to me, the Faces was a great rock band with a great soul singer, and it still was. You know, and to play with Kenny and Matt and Ronnie, who's my favourite guitarist, it was a buzz. And it was the band that we didn't do that many shows. The last show we did was in Japan. We headlined the Fuji Festival in front of 50,000 people, and it's the band that I used to stand in front of the mirror when I was 14, you know, when I couldn't play. So, yeah, it was great. And I'm mates with those guys now, you know. I see Ronnie Wood every once in a blue moon. He lives near me. He's got a big house. I haven't. But I see him pushing the pram down the street.
You didn't know Ronnie Wood prior to that.
I've met him a couple of times, briefly. Just cool guys. They're blokes. They're good guys.
Is there separate dressing rooms? Do you guys all get ready together? What do you talk about?
This, that and the other. Girls, women, life, troubles, betting, art, other bands, jokes, tell jokes. Just about everybody does, really.
Do you think that the reason why you've had the longevity you've had in the entertainment industry is because of your demeanor?
I don't know what kind of demeanor I've got. I suppose I'm kind of a bit laissez-faire and easygoing. Don't know, perhaps I'm either really clever or really stupid and too thick-skinned to give up.
The word on the street is that you're very humble.
I'm not that humble. I like rolling up my sleeves and doing it. I know I do little gigs and big gigs. I know in the back of my mind that I'll probably get a call to do something kind of worthwhile, but I also enjoy doing smaller things. And if you get really uptight that you're doing, and I used to, like, oh, you know, I'm not top of the pops anymore, it can get you down. But then you think, hang on a second, you know, it's a bit of a roll, just roll with it. Go on life's rich highway, you know, and if you go on stage going, oh, buy my record, I'm really uptight, it comes across. If you go on stage and have a laugh, people like it. You know, and it's not inane, vacuous humour, but I like to have some serious fun. And I get to work with some great people. I was just touring with my band before I come over here. I'm sort of doing a solo show tonight, which I enjoy doing. But they've got a great band, and the lead guitarist, Al Slick, playing with me. Now, we have a right laugh. We have become the Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau of rock and roll. I'm sure there's a few people like that, but we're going to take the crown for that. So hopefully we're going to be back over here in the fall. That's what we're working on as a band.
So the highlights of the Sex Pistols reunion, 1996 to 2008, and did you see a new level of maturity in Steve, Paul, and John?
A little bit. Yeah, we did it. We mended some fences and built some bridges, and then we went our separate ways again. But we do have something in common that only 4 people in the whole world have, is that when we get in a room and plug in and start playing with the Sex Pistols, and that's something to be celebrated and rewarded handsomely for, and we all realise that. And I think John's got a quote, you know, that the Sex Pistols, we might not be the best of friends, but we're not the worst of enemies, and I agree with that. Doesn't mean you have to live in each other's pockets.
Did you feel vindicated?
They could have asked any other bass player in the world to do it, and they asked me. But if I hadn't called up Steve Jones when I was in LA in 1995, it would never happen. I didn't call him up to reform the band, but I just called him up to be with a bit of kind of Matlock largesse, you know, how are you doing? We haven't spoken for 15 years. Oh, let's go and see John. He was kind of keen to do it.
What do you love most about Steve Jones?
I think he was the spirit of the Sex Pistols, not John. John was the cherry on the cake. Steve's band.
How did you come to record your new solo album, Good to Go, with former Bowie guitarist Earl Slick and Stray Cats drummer Slim Jim Phantom?
I kind of met them over years and doing different projects. I think every musician's life is peppered with projects that don't necessarily see the light of day. And you meet people and you get on with them, and I'd been doing some stuff with Slim Jim, and I'd also done something separate with Earl, and I wanted to make a different kind of album. It's not an acoustic album, but I don't even play bass on it, I play acoustic guitar, just to be different. And I went to see Dylan play at the Royal Albert Hall and I was a bit underwhelmed with his stage presence. So although I can appreciate him, so I concentrated on what the band were doing. The band was Charlie Sexton on guitar, Tony Garnier on double bass, a lot of it, and I'm not sure who the drummer was, I should look it up, but he played most of the set on brushes. And I thought, I've got all these songs I've been writing, because I've been doing loads of acoustic shows around the world. Why don't I do something a bit like that? My sort of punky version of that. Who can I ask? Well, Slim Jim's only got half a drum kit, I'll ask him. So I said, did he fancy doing a record with me? And he went, yeah. I said, who should we get on the guitar? And he said, how about Slick? I didn't know he knew him. But they'd had a band together in the 80s, I didn't know that. So we called him up, and he went, you're doing it with Slim Jim? Yeah, I'll do it. Any ideas for an engineer? How about this guy Mario? Who's Mario? Well, he did Bowie's last album, I worked. And it just all sort of fell into place. But it's only because the right kind of people are always keen to try and do something. Not necessarily they all want to get paid a bit, but nobody wants to take anybody to the cleaners, because the important thing is to be involved with something that's kind of cool somehow. And I'm quite fortunate they thought what I was doing was cool. And it's come out in a record, and it's a record I'm proud of.
What inspired the lyrics to the songs off Good to Go? Let's start off with Montague Terrace.
Well, that is the one cover song on the album. It's a Scott Walker song. And I did that because it sort of stems from my love of a French guy called Jacques Brel, or a Belgian guy called Jacques Brel. And it's Scott Walker trying to write that kind of song. But, Montague Terrace is this kind of place that we all live in. It doesn't have to be Montague Terrace. It could be called Lancastrian Boulevard, or it could be called the Harrow Road, or Smith Square or something. Everybody's got a place in the back of their mind that they can relate to where something of some consequence happened that, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune forced you to move on from, but you remember it fondly. The song's kind of to do with that. It touched a chord, and it's a bit different. It's my curveball on the album.
It touched me. It's very emotional.
Well, it's nothing wrong with being a bit emotional. Every now and then, you don't want it to become a monkey on your shoulder,
What inspired the lyrics to the song Wanderlust?
I've just been getting around a lot all the time. I hate being tied down. I'm a big lover of Roadrunner, not by Jonathan Richman, I like that, but by Junior Walker and the All-Stars, and it's my kind of rewrite of that, and it kind of strikes a chord,
Couldn't give a damn.
Can't really. No, it's if you're with the right person, if you listen to the songs, again, what life throws at you kind of pales into insignificance if you got the right team of two going about it.
And you got a hold of Chris Spedding to play on the song Keep On Pushing.
Yeah, that was another song I'd written after the bulk of the songs had been recorded in America, and I was listening back to it all. And it's more stuff in the can, but also you kind of want to make an album that's a complete kind of whole, which I think is lacking a little bit these days. And I'm quite pleased with some of the reviews. They say that it's like an album-y kind of album. So I thought, might need something else. I've got this idea I had from before, maybe that could do it. So I went in the studio and put it down. Slim Jim was in London. I did mainly the guitars, and I think that's the one song I played bass on. And then I was listening back to what we'd done the next day, and I thought we need something, and I was fiddling. I come up with a riff, and I thought, sounds a bit like that Everly Brothers song. Who did it? Price of Love. And it's not a nick from it. It's that kind of thing. So I tapped it into my computer, Price of Love. Video pops up, Brian Ferry doing it. And who's playing the guitar? Chris Spedding. So I know Chris, and I said, what are you doing tomorrow? Not a lot. Why? Do you want to come and play on this track? I've got something right up your street. So he said, yeah, he came down. How much do you want? Well, you play bass on the track of my album for nothing, so let's call it quits. It's kind of how it works. But it's funny, actually, over there, because my man Merwin has got a great picture of the album. Have you seen the finished cover?
Yeah.
Yeah, because, well, look, I just want to show your viewers how cool it looks. Look.
Wow, it's on vinyl.
See, when I get my... Hold that, like, I can strike the pose, look. See, I haven't got the gold jacket with me this time, folks, but if you go like that, see, that's me.
It's very Morrissey.
I was actually going for Billy Fury. You know Billy Fury?
Yeah.
Gold jacket. But then Morris is a bit Billy Fury as well.
What do you love most about playing live now?
Travelling. I like meeting people. It's a job. You get paid for it. My girlfriend says you're just showing off. and I think I actually like showing off and getting paid for it and travelling and meeting people. So there you go.
What's next for you?
What's next? When I go back to London, I've been writing, and I've almost got enough songs, or I might even have enough if I got to look at them to do the next album. So I'm going to investigate how to go about recording that. We are going to play in Japan. There's a band with Earl, and Jim Lowe is playing bass with me, and Chris Musto is doing the tour, because, well, he's my mate. He did the cover. He took that picture and did the cover, but he's also a good drummer. He used to play with Johnny Thunders, Nico, Kimwell. That's the band at the moment. So we're going to Japan, we got a tour there, and then we're talking about coming back here in the fall. So while I'm here, sort it all out. Matlock.
Fantastic. Well, Glen Matlock, thank you for being on the Blairing Out with Eric Blair show. We appreciate it.
You might as well have that one.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. There you go. This is the Blairing Out with Eric Blair show with Glen Matlock. Signing off. Bye-bye.
You did that very well. See you later. Thanks for having us.
The Blairing Out Show.